Of the internet, I have come once again to bring you the news of the week, news that I found, and what I think is important for the most part. All right, obviously there's many other things. Welcome. I am the Nomad. I hope that you're all having a good day and another festive season, which is upon us. All right, it has turned a bit chilly and nippy and a little bit cold outside. But that's what winter is for, to annoy the crap out of all of us. It is what it is. I've got my little coffee here. Part of the elixir of life. So to move on and hopefully everyone's having a good December. All right. Tomorrow is December 7th. Remember the day that'll live in infamy, Pearl Harbor. All right. I have a little tradition that I go through, a little ritual on December 7th, which is I watch a couple of movies. The first movie I watch is Tora, and then I watch Midway. And it's just a little ritual of my own. I hope that you all have a good day, or having a good festive season, like I said. Right? Christmas shopping is well underway. Too much underway, I could say. So, but anyway, let's get to the news. The battlefield picture worsening for the Ukraine as Trump pushes a peace plan. From Cassandra Vinogard, Oskander Chubko, and Maria Vernikova. All right. Then this is the New York Slimes. It was a clear attempt to project Russian power. Hours before meeting U.S. officials in Moscow this week about their plan to end the war, President Vladimir Putin claimed that Russian forces had seized the strategic city of Pokrovsk after a month-long fight. The reality was murkier. Slivers of the city were still contested, according to battlefield maps and the Ukrainian military. But Mr. Putin's claim, even if premature, reflected a trend shaping his unbending approach to negotiations. Russian forces are on the march. The Russians do have the upper hand, said Emil Kasthalmy. I'm not trying to butcher your name, ma'am. I do not know how to say it. I'm assuming you're a ma'am with Emil. All right, maybe you're maybe you're a man. I could be wrong. Military analyst with the Finland-based Blackbird Group. Ukraine is not yet at a point where it must capitulate, he said, but it is looking weak enough that the Russians think they can impose demands. Putin has ordered the Russian military to prepare for winter combat, signaling that talks with the U.S. officials that he is not budging from his hardline demands. Mr. Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, has since held a series of discussions in Miami with the Ukrainian delegation, with another expected to take place on Saturday, that both sides called constructive. These statements were being released, or as these statements were being released, Russia unleashed more than 650 drones and 51 missiles into towns and cities across the Ukraine in an assault that began overnight on Friday and stretched throughout Saturday morning, Ukrainian officials said. In recent weeks, Russian forces have advanced on several fronts. They are on the brink of capturing Pokrovsk, all right, a one-time logistics hub in the eastern region of Donetsk, all right, and have nearly encircled its neighbor Mironrad. All right, so let's take a look at what they're talking about here. All right, let's go on over here to live map. Excuse me. And what they're talking about is this area here. Okay, as you can see, there's mop-up operations that the Russians are conducting in Pokrovsk. There's Myriad, where they're now starting to push here. They have approximately a 2-mile gap at this point, all right, to try and escape out of. It looks like the only road, however, that's clear would be this road right here, which they could try and retreat from if there's for the forces that are inside of here. Okay. The upshot of this is the Ukrainians are in a bad position. Okay. Hello, Sam. I have been summoned. When are people going to stop believing the communists? Well, first of all, that's a good question. All right. But let me ask you a question, Sam. Who's the media? The media are the communists. So, yeah, you're going to have a problem there because the media is always going to tell you what their side of the story. Now, just because they're communists doesn't mean that they're pro-Russian. All right. In this case, they're very anti-Russian, and they're trying to basically uh, stop Russia and its aggression. But the only reason that they're trying to stop Russia and their aggression is because it's making them look bad. Okay, the U.S. and Western media. If this was happening, I can tell you right now, if this was happening, the Ukrainians being invaded by the Russians during the Reagan administration, if it was just 25 years ago, the media would have been in full support. They would have been calling Zelensky a dictator. They would have been calling out he's totally corrupt. Look at his chief of staff. Look at all the corruption. Look at all the things. They would be railing against any support for the Ukraine whatsoever. Now I have my own dislikes about giving the Ukrainians money. All right. Mainly because in this situation specifically with the Ukraine, and I want to be very, very clear here. When it comes to the Ukraine, it's a civil war with Russia. I know people don't like to hear that, but Ukraine is an invention of, as far as a nation state, it's more of an invention than anything else. And I know, hey, Mr. Barkley, I was playing Final Fantasy 2 or 16. Ukraine existed as a nation state in the modern age for about 6 months. All right, between right after World War I. All right, until the Soviet Union crushed them. Before that, they were all part of the Russian Federation for hundreds of years. Okay? The only time they became an independent state, and it was only a quasi-independent state at that, let's be perfectly frank, was when the Soviet Union collapsed and they created small little buffer states. Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, all right, Ukraine, Georgia, okay? They all became their own little areas. But they were still under the orbit of Russia. So the first one of those that really tried a hard breakaway was Zelensky, all right, trying to break Ukraine completely away from them. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of animosity and everything there. But in order to have a nation state, you need defensible borders. You got to have it. Granted, the Ukrainians are fighting. But if it wasn't for outside help, it wouldn't exist. There would be no fighting because they would have totally collapsed. If you want to know how significant it is, all you have to do, if you want to know how poor a situation that the Ukrainians are in, just take a look at what happened to them when we removed, just the U.S., removed intelligence information, all right, from the Ukrainians for a single week. Just a single week. Now, is that saying that we need to support the Ukrainians or that we need to support the Russians? No. But what it does say is like there's no reason for us to be involved. The only reason we're involved in this is because Biden was getting money from them. Let's be perfectly frank here. The only reason the U.S. now it wasn't just Biden. There's other elements of the corrupt U.S. government that were also taking money and kickbacks from the Ukrainians. All right, but we wouldn't be in the Ukraine right now. We would not be giving weapons to the Ukrainians right now if it wasn't for freaking Biden. That's a reality. And Zelensky, because he sit up there and decided to side with Biden rather than expose Biden's corruption, it was a personal choice. He helped Biden get elected by hiding the fact that they were double dealing, that Biden was on the take, that he was corrupt. And as soon as Biden became president, Zelensky started talking big about how he was going to join NATO. That's a reality. And it triggered a massive Russian response. Now, did the response go the way that Putin thought it would? No. All right. It certainly didn't. And there are a lot of Russians dying. And I'm not trying to make light of it. Ukrainians are fighting for their lives as Ukrainians. Right? But is it something on an international scale that the United States needed to be involved in? And the answer is no. The only good thing that's happening, and I'll get to it later in a different story, right? Is Europe, okay? But it's a long slaw, right, for the Europeans, because the Europeans have helped create this mess in a lot of ways, and have done very little to actually resolve the situation. But they're they're basically two-faced backstabbing weasels when it comes to the U.S. anyway. Excuse me. Let's get on with more stories. Enough of that. Enough complaining about the big bad Russians. From Japan Wire, a Chinese aircraft carrier conducts drills in the Pacific. Japan scrambles jets. China's Navy conducting training flights in the Pacific Ocean on Saturday from its aircraft carrier Liaoning, all right, after the ship passed through waters off Japan's southernmost prefecture of Okinawa, prompting the self-defense forces to scramble some aircraft, the defense ministry said. The latest takeoff and landing drills involved Chinese fighters and helicopters, marked the first to be confirmed in waters around Japan since China commissioned its third aircraft carrier, the Fujian, all right, last month. They come amid heightened diplomatic tensions between the Asian neighbors. China is thought to be testing and boosting its operational capability in waters far from the mainland, and its increasing maritime assertiveness has alarmed Japan and other countries in the Indo-Pacific region. Japan's defense ministry spotted the Liang sailing in the East China Sea on Friday, about 420 kilometers north of Kuba Island, an inlet controlled by Japan but claimed by China. Joined by three Chinese destroyers, the aircraft carrier then headed toward the Pacific Ocean and conducted the training flights in waters some 270 kilometers west of Okinawa Island, the ministry said. Okinawa is close to Taiwan, which Peking or Beijing, all right, regards as a renegade province to be reunified with the mainland by force if necessary. The recent spike in tensions between Tokyo and Beijing stems from the Japanese Prime Minister Sane Takaichi's remarks that a military attack on Taiwan could present a survival threatening situation for Japan, indicating that the SDF, all right, potential involvement in response to such a scenario. The introduction of a third aircraft carrier has enabled China to use them on a rotational basis, with at least one always deployed while the other two undergo maintenance work, according to experts. Okay, China Gundams. Yes, uh, China is posturing. They are becoming, you know, very aggressive. Right? Can't deny that. Can't deny that. Um, it is a problem that Japan has got to deal with. Now, the new prime minister of Japan, all right, I think is trying to push a more defense-minded approach and a more, military-minded approach to Japan. Japan has so far been reluctant to boost its defensive forces significantly in certain areas. In other areas, it's very significant. For example, Japan has a massive fleet of anti submarine destroyers. Okay. It is massive. Okay. So to say that Japan is completely defenseless and that Japan couldn't support Taiwan, all right, which is fairly close to it, is a misnomer. Now, that of course would bring a response from the United States at this point. But Xi Jinping is serious about trying to reunify Taiwan with mainland China. And right now, Beijing has a lot of other problems. So building these aircraft carriers was their first step, and well, they thought that building these aircraft carriers wasn't going to be the first step. That was the final step. Once they had these aircraft carriers up and operational, they thought that Xi Jinping was thinking, okay, it's almost ready. It's time to go. It's time to pull the trigger. Only to find out that his armed forces, are suffering from so much corruption that if they attempted an invasion, even with the 3 aircraft carriers that they have, they would likely lose. And so they have repivoted. They have changed direction to an extent, and Xi Jinping is in the middle of purging, trying to get real professionals in the military to be in control. But let's be honest, it's a dictatorial country, and corruption goes hand in hand. Good luck. Now, I'm not saying that Taiwan doesn't have its own problems. Taiwan has its own problems with corruption. I think every nation does to a degree. But when your, you know, ballistic missile systems, when you find that your rockets for your ballistic missiles that you're going to threaten the world with nuclear fire with are not loaded with rocket fuel but water, well, that speaks for itself. That's a level of corruption that's beyond levels of corruption. Talking about Europe, exclusive U.S. sets 2027 deadline for Europe-led NATO defense, officials say. Good luck. I love the story. I love Trump pushing this. This is freaking awesome from Reuters. All right. Uh, the United States wants Europe to take over the majority of NATO's conventional defensive capabilities, from intelligence to missiles, by 2027, Pentagon told diplomats in Washington this week. A tight deadline that struck some European officials as unrealistic. If it's unrealistic to you, just how long have you been freaking screwing the United States over? If boosting your defense in 2 years, all right, to where you're taking over the majority of your own friggin' defense is unrealistic to you, what does that tell you? You want to know why there's problems around the world? You want to know why there's economic depression and things like that? It's because of this. Because Sugar Daddy has had enough. The message, recounted by 5 sources familiar with the discussion, including a U.S. official, was conveyed at a meeting in Washington this week of Pentagon staff overseeing NATO policy and several European delegations. The shifting of this burden from the United States to European members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization would dramatically change how the United States, a founding member of the post-war alliance, works with its most important military partners. What important military partners? This is the problem. There was no partnership there. Important military partners where? Let's talk about some things for a moment, shall we? You have the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. You have how many nations on the Atlantic? You've got Germany, you've got Britain, you've got France, you've got Spain, you've got, well, Italy in the Mediterranean, right? You've got Poland, right? You've got Sweden and Norway, which are not part of NATO. And yet, when it comes to military force in the oceans, with the exception of a very small, and I mean very small, active fleet from the British and a very tiny fleet from the French, everything is dominated by the United States. For NATO? So, when it comes to the maritime defense of the logistics line to NATO from the United States is fully engaged. But that's not all. No, ladies and gentlemen, we're also the ones who support, because we got the most planes, we've got the most fighter jets, we've got the most helicopters, we've got the most tanks, we've got, and I'm not saying than any other nation, I'm talking about all the other nations in NATO combined, defending NATO to this day. The NATO nations were never serious about their defense. By the way, Holland is another nation. None of them have taken their defense seriously except for Poland. For obvious reasons, Poland's serious. None of those other nations are freaking serious about it. The great Wehrmacht and the German army has less than 5, actually only has 350 main battle tanks to support defense of the entire European theater. Five, 350 main battle tanks, of which supposedly, by some estimates, all but 50 are in dire need of maintenance. So if a war happened, the the fleet of Leopard 2s, they could provide a brigade of Leopard 2s to the fight. A brigade. Battle Tank was a great game on Nintendo 64. So why is the nations now all having problems? Because Sugar Daddy, paying for her entire defense, has had enough. He's saying, you know what? You got to pay your own freight. You got to pay your own way. And all these wonderful social programs that they all put together for all their groups have started to come tumbling down. Because you got to pay for your defense. And they're finally being forced to pay for it. And they're not happy. Because push comes to shove, the only way that they could do this is to take taxes and make them so high that their own people couldn't even sit up there and live. Because they've been so over-reliant upon defense of the United States coming to save them. They've basically been using our defense to pay for their wonderful social welfare programs. And of course, the people are completely addicted to it because it's been generation after generation now that have been addicted to this stuff, that now all of a sudden when the bills come due, when they've run out of somebody else's money, in this case the United States, all of a sudden now, okay, well we got to start paring some of this stuff back. Good luck. Because that's where you're at right now. Meanwhile, from The Guardian, pressure grows on reckless excess as twins scandal engulf the Pentagon chief. Secretary of Defense defiant, but allegations of war crimes and blistering watchdog report increased calls for him to go. Pete Hegseth is facing the most serious crisis in his tenure as Defense Secretary, engulfed by allegations of war crimes in the Caribbean and a blistering Inspector General report accusing him of mishandling classified intelligence. Yet, despite the long list of trouble, all right, as lawmakers on both sides call for his resignation, Hegseth shows no signs of stepping down and still holds President Donald Trump's support. The twin crises have engulfed the former Fox News personality in a separate but overlapping allegations that lawmakers, policy experts, and former officials say reveal a pattern of dangerous recklessness at the helm of the Pentagon. Look, dudes, all right, first of all, we already know what the Caribbean issue was, right? It was a made-up story by the Washington Post. And it was done that way intentionally to sit up there and lie to the American people that people that were clinging to wreckage were ordered to be attacked again when they weren't clinging to wreckage, when they had climbed back on board the boat, all right, and were sending freaking radio transmissions out, all right, for people to come and get them help, all right, yeah. The boat was disabled at the moment, but it was perfectly intact. It still had the drugs. It was still a freaking floating, drug boat till it got hit again. Oh, but they ordered to kill the people that were floating on wreckage. Bullshit. It was a lie. People's lives weren't even mentioned. All right. They forced the admiral to come to Congress, and Congress didn't like what they were told. Of course, the video has not been shown to the American people. All right. But as soon as it was shown to Congress, out came the Democrats. Ow, it was disturbing. Ow, it was horrible. It was all a setup that's going nowhere. Right? Now, you can expect these kind of things from The Guardian. You can expect these things from the Washington Post. All it's doing is teaching people, right, not to trust the media because the media is not honest. Let's go around the world. Chinese embassy's open day event captivates hundreds of Mongolians. you, you mean hundreds of captive Mongolians were ordered to go to the Chinese event? Ulaanbaatar. The embassy of China in Mongolia on Friday hosted an open day event, which was attended by more than 200 primary and secondary school teachers, students, and parents in Ulaanbaatar. The event featured calligraphy, painting, traditional crafts, offering participants a taste of the charm of Chinese and Mongolian cultures. The event at the event, a cultural event jointly organized by the Chinese embassy and the Mongolians Children Creative Center was a highlight. Traditional Chinese crafts such as ink painting, weaving, paper cutting, and embroidery were all demonstrated live, allowing children to experience the beauty of these skills firsthand. Or else you will understand the greatness of China. Do not think of Mongolia as a separate country. Actually, Mongolia and China obviously have a very intermixed cultural identity. The Mongolians, of course, did conquer China. All right, under Genghis Khan, the who then basically they ruled. The Mongolians ruled, China, right, for quite a while. Kublai Khan is, I believe, it was Kublai Khan, all right, who attempted to invade Japan, all right, which was failed, all right, because of the quote unquote divine wind or kamikaze, wrecking ships and so forth, and the Japanese defense. People tend to forget that they undercut that a little bit, right? Japan was not just rolling over to let the Chinese come and invade it back in the day, but the cons, after a while, the Mongolians ceased to be nomadic warriors and they became, very much integrated into the Chinese, at least the aristocracy in charge of China. And so they became more Chinese than they were Mongolian. And this was despite efforts to get back to their Mongolian roots. So culturally, the Chinese won. So overall, culturally, China won. Now Mongolia is utterly surrounded on three sides. It has no escape. It's landlocked. Um, the areas are poor for the most part. There are some other areas that are somewhat modern, but it's still very poor. And of course, to the north, you've got, the former Soviet Union, the stands. So, as far as an event goes, China flexing. All right, and the first number of stories from the Smoking Gun. Minnesota man 66 was naked and not afraid, cops report. Throwing caution and his clothes to the wind, a 66-year-old Minnesota man was spotted outside his home chainsawing while buck-ass naked, according to police, who say the suspect has frequently been spotted in the altogether uh, by neighbors. I've never heard of the altogether. I'm not sure what that means. Paul Severson was charged Tuesday with disorderly conduct in connection with an alleged nude displays outside his residence in the city of Lake Crystal. After interviewing multiple witnesses, a sheriff's deputy observed a nude Severson appear to from beside a shed. The cops advised Severson that he could not be naked outside with children around and people driving by. Neighbors reported Severson did yard work while in the nude, with one witness saying the suspect was chainsawing while buck-ass naked. Well, yard work naked sounds terrible. Yeah, especially in Minnesota this time of year. Holy crap! I'm kind of impressed when you think about it. You got to imagine, you know. I'm gonna go get some logs. It's getting a little chilly outside. Yes, and his name is Severson. It takes all kinds, folks. America, what a country. Let's go to Britain. Crown Jewels attacked. Activists attacked Crown Jewels with apple crumble and custard at the Tower of London, demanding more tax on high earners. 4 people have been arrested after activists smothered apple crumble and custard over a glass case containing the crown jewels inside the Tower of London this morning. The campaigners, who have identified themselves as members of the Take Back Power, then unfurled the sign saying, "Democracy has crumbled. Tax the rich." Who do you think's paying the taxes now? Take Back Power said it is a new nonviolent civil resistance group demanding the UK government establish a permanent citizens' assembly, a House of the People, which has the power to tax extreme wealth and fix Britain. The fact that you're doing this shows that you have no ability to fix Britain because you're the problem. It is the third action carried out in the last 5 days by this group, which includes activists who've been affiliated with other protest groups, including the Young Demand and Palestine Action. Footage shared by the group showed one demonstrator removing a large foil tray of crumble from a bag and then slamming it against the glass protecting the imperial state crown. Another then repeatedly poured a tub of bright yellow custard onto the front of the case. The demonstrators then opened their coats to show t-shirt slogans which read, "Take back power," before one shouted, "Democracy has crumbled," and another shouted, "Britain is broken. We come here to the jewels of the nation to take back power." Join us at takebackpower.net. You people are the problem. You people are the problem. This is a first world issue. It's a first world issue where these people are running around screaming about everything but going to work and busting their asses. They are jealous of other people and they want to have what they have given to them. They don't want to work for it. Meanwhile, our wonderful CDC has announced U.S. vaccine advisors say not all babies need hepatitis B shot at birth. Really? What a surprise. A federal vaccine advisory committee voted on Friday to end the long-standing recommendation that all U.S. babies get hepatitis B vaccine on the day they were born. The loud chorus of medical and public health leaders decried the action of the panel, whose members were all currently appointed by the U.S. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a leading anti-vaccine activist, before this year becoming the nation's top health official. "This is the group that can't shoot straight," said Dr. William Schaffner, all right, a Vanderbilt University vaccine expert who for decades, all right, has been involved with the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices and its work group. Several medical societies and state health departments said that they would continue to recommend them. While people may have to check their policies, the trade group AHIP, formerly known as America's Health Insurance Plans, said its group still will cover the birth doses of hepatitis B vaccine. Okay, here's the problem. Okay, babies who get the hepatitis B vaccine from who don't have parents that are infected with hepatitis, they don't need it. Okay? The idea that somehow this is going to help us is ridiculous. Now, according to some of these experts, the uh, uh, rate of hepatitis B has gone from, you know, 95% to 98% less people in the country. All right. So the question is with all vaccines, with all drugs, right? There are people who are going to have negative reactions. That's a reality. Okay, that's a reality. The question has always been: do we continue to give vaccines? All right, is it helping things or is it hurting? There's a reason why kids today don't receive smallpox vaccines in America because for the most part, smallpox has been eradicated in the United States. When I was growing up, everybody got a smallpox vaccine. All right? But we don't give it anymore. Why? Because it's not necessary. And there were people who had really negative reactions to smallpox. Even people who had the reason people had big blotches like little circles on their arms, right? Like my sister does. My brothers did, right? From the smallpox vaccines when they were growing up. They would have these small little what are now basically scars, right? On their shoulders from their smallpox vaccine. Now, I don't have that scar. I got the shot. I've had the shot several times. I had the shot in the military. It's a booster shot. And the person was like, wow. Because I didn't get any kind of reaction to the vaccine or anything else. I think that if I was born in the 1700s and I had met smallpox victims, right, I probably would have been safe for some reason, right? Because my immune system, for whatever reason, wasn't susceptible to smallpox. Mumps, measles, chickenpox, got them all, had them all, right? Had the disease, not just not the vaccines necessarily. Although I do have had those since, but yeah, no. So the way things are, all right? It is what it is. What it is. So yeah, taking these vaccines if it's not necessary for the public is silly. I had smallpox. I had Mr. Barkley. I had smallpox as well. In fact, when I had the mumps, I had a full blown thing of the mumps, right? And what was worse is I had a cold at the same time, and every time I sneezed, my it would hurt. So one time I tried to hold the sneeze in. That was a mistake. How the mumps hurt, but it's part of the immune system. You don't want. Okay, so if we're reconnected finally successfully, hopefully that has gone away. We're still seeing drops. Let's see if we finally got back up to where we're actually got some decent frames. Okay, we are back. I apologize for all the problems. All right, it seems that Discord is causing issues, which we're having problems, but we're back. We should be back now. All right, I apologize for the delay, but we will continue back to what we were talking about before. All right. Let me get back to what we were doing here. There we go. Alrighty. Now we should be able to see the new things again. Let's see where we're at, ladies and gentlemen. And we're back to, I believe, where we were before. All right. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has is now reviewing the case for the 14th Amendment, and I do apologize. I do apologize for the issues that we were having. All right, looks like I'm going to have to ditch from in the future anything to do with Discord because Discord seems to be having problems. But aside from that, let's get back to where we were. All right, justices will hear the appeal. Okay, the the problem now is that there's so many people in this country who are U.S. citizens and have been U.S. citizens for decades, many decades, right? That were just got their citizenship because they were born, because it was read for the longest time that they were U.S. citizens once they came across the border and gave birth. So, in practicality, to remove those people from citizenship is is really going to be very difficult, if not impossible. All right? And it will affect millions of people. This is not just a few people, this will affect millions. And will disenfranchise millions of people who probably have been voting for decades. So the Supreme Court's ruling on this could be substantial depending upon how they come down. Now, do I believe in birthright citizenship? No, I do not.